Hola, ¿cómo estás, amigos? Just kidding.
Hola.
We're gonna speak English on this. It's been a minute since Corstian and I have been in Spanish class in high school. That was a wild time. Corstian, how have you been, man?
Been pretty good. Just chilling, working, not doing much, being a bum.
Don't
No,
say
but
that.
yeah.
Football savant. Football savant is the term I
Mhm.
prefer to hear on this channel.
Yeah. Um, you have some family out of town right now, so it's just like my brother, my mom at home right now, so nothing crazy's happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. Spend some downtime with your mom and your
Hmm.
brother. Um, just off of watching a wild Stanley Cup Finals. That Game
Oh
7 was
yeah.
really nice. I really thought Edmonton would pull it out,
Hmm.
but they just could not score at all. Like, congrats to the Florida Panthers. What a game. What a
Hmm.
series. What a series. It's kind of hoping for the Dallas Mavericks to pull out the same thing, but like, I mean, the hockey's. I'm gonna have to start watching hockey more often. That is
Hmm.
exciting to watch, and as well as soccer. A lot of sports really, and probably
Hmm.
tennis. Well said. I love watching tennis, but um, yeah, it's about that time of year. No basketball, no football.
Hmm.
Pretty sad. So going to other sports, but today we're going to be talking about the NFC East. We got four teams that we'd like to talk about. Two project area teams, I'd like to say. One, two teams that disappointed after massive expectations. So it should be an interesting dive into each of these teams, Corsian. We'll start with the
Hmm.
Dallas Cowboys. They had one of the best seasons last year that I think I've ever seen out of the Cowboys.
Hmm.
Um, they had a legitimate shot to go to the Super Bowl with his lineup. Dak having an MVP season, defense
Hmm.
playing out of its mind, Deron Bland playing out of his mind. And what happened against the Green Bay Packers? Oh no, tragedy awaits. Same old Cowboys. The story continues. We're going to talk about it later with their coaching staff, but 1 year deals across the board. CeeDee Lamb is not signed yet. And with all these quarterback extensions, Dak Prescott has to be extended yet again. And we know the last time when he was trying to get extended, how much drama there was with that.
Hmm.
Mike McCarthy on a 1 year deal. Mike Zimmer, their new defensive coordinator, is on a 1 year deal. This feels like a Super Bowl or bust season for this team.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel that way too about this Cowboys team.
Looking at their schedule, I mean, for a 1 seed, this is not a bad schedule at all. I
Mhm.
feel like I still think they could hit double digit wins. Um, so I had them in the range of like 10 to I'm gonna give them 10 to 13 wins. I think they're gonna be on the lower end of that. Like it's more likely we'll see them at 10 or 11. Their hardest
Mhm.
matchups are right on the get go. They have the Browns, Ravens, um, within the first 3 weeks, but then after that it gets really light. So if
Mhm.
they could end with like one or two losses up to their bye, I think they have a solid shot to hit double digit wins, despite facing these four teams right after the bye: 49ers, Falcons, Eagles, and Texans. All
Mhm.
of those teams are going to be better than they were the previous season,
Mhm.
and that's a gauntlet. And then probably the only other tough game on their schedule besides the Eagles in Week 17 is the Bengals. Um,
Uh-huh.
but all these other games, they feel winnable to me
Mhm.
because primarily they have the Giants, the Commanders making up for their games, so they have some wiggle room here.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the Cowboys here, um, I think they have the potential to be kind of like a 14-win team. I'm not saying that's like what's gonna happen. I think they definitely hit double-digit wins this season. Their team is simply good enough, regardless of how they perform in the playoffs. Like every year, they have a great team put together, and this is a team that does win games. Last season, I had concerns about Dak Prescott, but with how he played the year before last season, in terms of like interceptions and whatnot. But I think he proved me wrong in terms of being able to run an efficient offense, um, and so I think I'm not saying Dak Prescott is. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to see him succeed. I think he can be successful. He could have a successful playoff run, but yeah, I think because of how make or break the season is, in my opinion, for them, they are going to be kind of just. I'm assuming, and I'd hope they'd be an aggressive team throughout the season, just in all their games.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they're a little bit harsh on Dak Prescott, but like the playoff stuff is valid. But I feel like the playoff stuff has been like a problem with the team, regardless of
Mm-hmm.
who's been at quarterback. Because you've seen like Tony
Mm-hmm.
Romo at quarterback, and like before
Mm-hmm.
that, ever since the Aikman days, they haven't been able to figure it out.
Yeah.
So it's now that the Lions have got that playoff experience, Packers a little bit to some extent. Then you got the 49ers and the Eagles to always deal with year after year after year. Um, it's last year was probably their best shot, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at like the last 3 years, including this upcoming season, last year was their best shot to make some noise
Mm-hmm.
here, and they didn't get it done. So I'm a little bit pessimistic on their playoff chances as well. But they could prove me wrong. Um,
Mm-hmm.
looking at the free agency moves, I was a little bit underwhelmed. They lost a lot of guys last year. Um, Tony Pop from last year, Tony Pollard, Michael Gallup, Dorrance Armstrong, Tyron Smith, Stephon Gilmore, all
Mm-hmm.
very productive players for them. They did get back Zeke, and that's going to be huge for their inside running game inside the five. Um, Zeke is going to help convert a lot of those red zone opportunities into easy touchdowns. And I think they need that, especially in the playoffs. Like, I'm not expecting Zeke to have a 1,400-yard rushing season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody should be having that expectation. But as a fantasy back, he is still a top 20 back to me purely because of like the red zone opportunities he's going to
Mm-hmm.
get and the efficiency he can get on the 3 or 4 to 5 yards that you have to get on third down. Zeke can get that for you. He's still an NFL caliber back that can do that. And um, I feel like the re-signings of Dottle and signing Rose Freeman in free agency were good to establish like the types of backs they want. They realized Tony Pollard's like the flashy guy. That's all fine and dandy, but that's not going to get you much when you need to have that 3rd and 3. You don't have a good passing game lined up. Let's
Mm-hmm.
run the ball down your throat with our
Mm-hmm.
great offensive line.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think it's kind of funny how Jerry Jones had said that this offseason they're going to go all in, just to have 3 signings of note. Really, just like 3 signings in general, which I think was pretty disappointing for Cowboys fans. Luckily, I'm not one, so I'm not super disappointed on that front. Um, but yeah, I like what you said about the running backs. I think bringing Ezekiel Elliott back is huge. I think they took him for granted, especially when you look at how they did last season in the running department, where it's like Pollard, he was serviceable, but it felt almost like Alexander Madison kind of season, where like he was getting the touches because he was really the only guy there. I mean, he had proven that he was good the previous season, obviously, and that's why they shipped off, or they got rid of Ezekiel Elliott because they thought Pollard could be the guy. But then, just the quality of play Ezekiel Elliott, even at his worst, can kind of consistently bring you, shows how, I don't know. It's like it shows how elite he is and like can still technically be. But yeah, I like Rico Dowdle. I think he can put up similar numbers to, maybe Tony Pollard 2 seasons ago when it was the Zeke and Pollard combination. Just because
100%.
Dowdle will, he will have to take touches because Ezekiel Elliott isn't, who he used to be with those 1,500 yard seasons.
Yeah, and Dottle's always been an underrated player.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is he's always been buried on the depth chart with like Zeke and
Mm-hmm.
Pollard. Now, last season, the Cowboys finally realized what they had in him. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing with Pollard that people don't understand is it's kind of like the Jalen Warren effect, but like Jalen Warren has justifiably been really good regardless of the volume. For Pollard, it depends on the volume in a negative way. Like if you're giving him like 12 to 14 touches, fine. That's fine. I trust Tony Pollard. And that this includes rushing and receiving
Mm-hmm.
because you're not asking him to do much. He has fresh legs. He can make those explosive plays happen. But if you're trusting them to be a 20 carry back, that is different. That's the difference with him. So like, even though he ends up in Tennessee, I think he ended up with Taji
Mm-hmm.
Spears. Like, I think that's still an ideal scenario for him because Taji Spears is a feature back that people haven't realized
Mm-hmm.
yet. And I think they tried to use Tony Pollard in that way um, last season, and it's just not working out. So um, I like it from that sense where the Cowboys are correcting their wrongs here.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely think the interior running game will play a huge part in their passing game, not being as heavily dependent on in the playoffs. So good note there. Eric Hendricks is a notable signing to me because of the Mike Zimmer impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to play a large role here. But enough about the free agency. Not much happened for the
Mm-hmm.
NFL draft. I really liked their first three picks,
Mm-hmm.
Guyton, Nealon, and BB, because it showed a commitment to who they are fundamentally. Offensive line, great. Edge defenders, great. And especially if you think about Demarcus Lawrence getting up there in years,
Mm-hmm.
you get out ahead of that by getting Nealon, underrated defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of them, I don't know too much about,
Mm-hmm.
but they got guys in the right places. Like seventh
Yeah.
round pick, spend one on a tackle, spend one on a defensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
What's the worst that can happen? I thought that was uh pretty a strong draft in the first three picks. We'll see what happens with the
Mm-hmm.
back half of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you, I liked their first 3 rounds. I was going into the draft, I was pretty high on Marshawn Leland. I was telling you how just much of an absolute specimen this dude was, and the fact that like he's a specimen that had technique already, and that's in college, which really surprising just because most times when you see these super athletes that are maybe like third, fourth round picks, they're huge projects that are almost 100% raw, and you're only drafting them because they are physically just insane. But he did have some power rush technique, which I really liked, and the fact that they still do have Lawrence and Parsons ahead of him gives them time to refine that just a little bit more before they need to rely on him, um, which I think is really good for his development, and the fact that he has Lawrence and Parsons to sit behind and learn a little bit from, I think is going to be super great. I hope in like 2 seasons or so he's just going to be an absolute menace opposite of Micah Parsons, and they'll be like the best pass rush duo in the league for like a couple seasons.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, with Dorrance Armstrong leaving, that was a huge blow because he was supposed to be that like Demarcus Lawrence replacement,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously the Cowboys couldn't afford him given how many losses they had in total. So
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, they're banking on Nealon being that guy. He has some time. He's not expected to start right away.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, second year breakouts. I could say Luke Schumacher.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of my guys I liked last season with the tight end spot. He was like in the top three on my list. I think he was
Mm-hmm.
second or first.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember. No, probably second. But I think the second year guy of note that I think is breaking out is Mozzie Smith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right now, he's behind Golston, but I could easily see a scenario where he's playing side by side by Adugiazua and wreaking havoc. I think if there's a year to break out, it's him.
Mm-hmm.
So really excited about his prospects.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Mozzie Smith is definitely a candidate for that too. I think a more, I guess, less serious one would be Deuce Vaughn. Obviously, he had a lot of preseason hype last season, and I think the fact that Rico Dowdle, Tony Pollard, and Deuce Vaughn, all three of them have somewhat of a similar play style in terms of they're not super heavy like power backs, like the
Yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott build kind of made it a case where Dowdle and Vaughn didn't get as many touches as I think they necessarily deserved. Um, and so I think there's a chance that we see a little bit more of him. I don't know if he'll be super efficient, but I am excited to hopefully see him get a bit more touches this season, especially in
And
like the.
yeah, and that's kind of the reason why they let go of Tony Pollard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they saw what they had in Dowdle and Vaughn. and they realize, oh, we have redundancy here
Mm-hmm.
for a cheaper cost. So it makes sense to keep those guys like Pollard go, and then
Mm-hmm.
sign a guy like Zeke, a guy we don't have on the roster reliably, and then Royce Freeman to back him up. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
definitely a lot more balanced approach from the running game. But I think you're going to see a reversion back to that compared to last year. From the coaching side, Mike Zimmer's a huge one because
Yeah.
he brings a perspective that like the Cowboys didn't necessarily have, and
Mm-hmm.
that's extreme strategic defensive planning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a diss on Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn's come from like the cover three like
Mm-hmm.
side, but like he he unlocked Michael Parsons, which is good. But what
Mm-hmm.
Zimmer's gonna do is make it impossible to game plan against Michael Parsons because he's going to
Yeah.
change alignments and fronts and different packages on third down. He's going to bring you know how like offensive packages you might have the same set of personnel but like hundreds of different plays off of that. You don't know based off a single alignment what play is going to be run. Zimmer does that from the defensive end on third down. Well, you know they're probably bringing 6 or 7, but you don't know where they're coming from. You don't know how they're going to do it, and he does a really good job of disguising things, especially in
Mm-hmm.
his days in Minnesota. Just pressuring with four, he would have a way to rush the quarterback horizontally and
Mm-hmm.
have his four linemen take horizontal angles to hit the quarterback. One rushes shallow to the quarterback just in case he steps up in the pocket.
Mm-hmm.
One runs deep, but then you have another like kind of inner overlap him. So like if the quarterback doesn't have a deep drop, you still have a guy that's um,
Mm-hmm.
cutting him off. And then just the way he rushes, it really think of it like paint brushes going
Mm-hmm.
opposite directions of defensive ends. That's kind of the idea he wants to have.
Yeah.
And then he can get very psychotic with his coverages and this guy's
Mm-hmm.
coverages, sort of like a
Yeah.
Rex Ryan. So like the Cowboys haven't had that. So I actually think their defense will be more consistently good. Like in
Uh-huh.
Dan Quinn's scheme, they were explosive and they were playmakers. But in the
Mm-hmm.
playoffs, that didn't matter. This move is a move towards the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
we show our tendencies, maybe, but we have counters off our own tendencies. I don't necessarily feel like Dan Quinn had that. And that's gonna be something I really like Zimmer, as you can tell. I think he's
Mm-hmm.
actually an upgrade over Dan Quinn.
Yeah.
You may not see the explosive defense from the Cowboys that you did last season, but I
Mm-hmm.
definitely think you're going to see a smarter Cowboys defense.
Yeah. And also with Dan Quinn, I think he definitely benefited from just the number of elite playmakers that this Cowboys defense already had. Um, and like, because I know in the past couple years, there's been talks about Dan Quinn being one of the potential coaching candidates for the Denver Broncos. And literally each time, all the Broncos fans that I like see online and stuff are like, we don't want Dan Quinn. And like, just other fans are like, yeah, you don't want Dan Quinn as your head coach. And so it's like, he's had success in the past, but I think he's definitely benefited from, having Trevon Diggs, who's, I think he's still susceptible in coverage at times, but he's phenomenal with his interceptions. You have Micah Parsons, arguably the best pass rusher in the league right now, maybe second to TJ Watt. So you just got these like superstars here that can really wreck a game without you necessarily needing to do phenomenal coaching. And so with Mike Zimmer, I think he is that level up that can really elevate this defense.
And on that note, I think the X factor is going to be Trevon Diggs coming off of injury,
Mm-hmm.
season-ending injury. I
Mm-hmm.
think Mike Zimmer is going to help take the best parts of Diggs' games and
Mm-hmm.
accentuate that and going
Yeah.
to minimize the lapses in this game. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Zimmer's a perfect coach for a guy like Diggs. Like, Parsons is going to be good with any type of coach, I feel like. But,
Yeah.
like, with guys that have very explosive ability, but, like, very clear weaknesses,
Mm-hmm.
um, like a Trevon Diggs, like, he can get got in, like, double moves and whatnot. Zimmer
Yeah.
sees that, and he's going to work around that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Diggs will be a better player for it. So I'm calling him the X factor because if he does, this defense is going to be a lot different. Where they're not going to get
Mm-hmm.
beat as much for the air, like in shootouts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, it's also going to be on the defensive side, but I'm going to go with DeMarcus Lawrence. I feel like he's kind of fallen out of the limelight of this defense where, like I feel like his last really great season was that year before he signed his big contract. And he's kind of been off the radar almost, I think, especially with Micah Parsons there. But it's also a case where I'm like, you have Micah Parsons on one side. I feel like Lawrence should be able to eat a bit more. But like last season, he had 4 sacks, and I mean he's good at runs. Like his run defense, I think is still good. But I'd like to see him higher in the sack category, or maybe even getting like 8 to 9 sacks this upcoming season. I think it'd be a huge bounce back, and I think just having that opposite threat to Micah Parsons will just elevate this defense's playmaking ability.
Okay. Moving on to the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
I have them as division winners this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think people been completely writing them off, not realizing the changes they made from the coaching standpoint and thinking that their Super Bowl run was a fluke.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that with the Eagles in particular. I look at their schedule, and although they start out in Brazil of all places against the Packers, their schedule is honestly like on par with the Cowboys, if not easier. Like outside of the AFC North, which is hard, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
The only teams they have to worry about, in my opinion, are the Falcons and the Jaguars. So I see this team having a 12 to 14 win season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they can hit 14, but I could see a 12 win season out of them. I feel 80% confident they can hit that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think a 12-win season feels pretty easy for them. It's like I feel like it's weird because I agree that they feel like they'd be the division winners, but I feel like their ceiling is just a little bit lower than the Cowboys. But I still see them as the winners, if that makes sense. Where it's like I think the Cowboys could potentially be just like an unstoppable force, but realistically, they're
They
not.
never hit their ceiling though. They never hit their ceiling. They have a ceiling of talent, but they never hit it. That's the issue with the Cowboys. So it totally makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but back to the Eagles, which is the team we're on. Like I think their schedule is a lot, like it's a little bit easier, and that's gonna make the difference.
Yeah.
As far as like free agency pickups, Devin White, getting Gardner Johnson was back. Saquon was the biggest one. That okay, I'm telling you right now, if Saquon's not drafted in like top 3 of fantasy running backs, he should be. And if you're getting him in like 7th or 8th number pick, and I don't care if I don't get him, if I pick in the spot, it doesn't matter. But like he's the one guy that I feel confident will have a 1,400-yard season on the ground.
Yeah.
We're talking about a read option team with Jalen Hurts. This is the best running back the Eagles have had since Jalen Hurts has got drafted. By far. They took the best player on the Giants, nabbed him on this team, and he is going to bring an explosive element that just wasn't there for the Eagles last year.
Yeah.
DeAndre Swift's an explosive player, but Saquon's on another level. And then that wasn't all. They got Bryce Huff. Brandon Graham's back. It sucks that Jason Kelsey retired, but just their free agency moves alone, like, nice job, Harry Rosen.
Yeah. Yeah, this team is just so well built. Their free agency, I think, was great. Their drafts over the past couple of years have been phenomenal as well. Because like we talk about Jason Kelsey leaving in retirement, but then you have Cam Jurgens here, who was drafted in the 2nd round in 2022. So it's like they've prepped already for the retirement of Jason Kelsey with a move like Cam Jurgens, and like knowing how well this team's just been able to develop their offensive line, especially just being prepared ahead of time. I'm super confident that Cam Jurgens, while he may not be as good as Kelsey right now, will still be probably one of the better centers in the league. Just with my knowledge of draft capital, the team, and then just what we've seen from him so far. Despite him being
not only that, they have one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
unbelievable. And not only you talked about the draft, and this is what the elite teams do as far as like Joe goes. You project out in the future what could be a problem with this roster.
Mm-hmm.
We need to address it now and anticipate it so we can continue building
Mm-hmm.
sustained success. This is what sustained success looks like. Now
Mm-hmm.
the Eagles have to get there, finish the job, win the Super Bowl, but this is exactly what you want to do as far as a general manager.
Mm-hmm.
Howie Roseman has been aggressive. I don't know where he's getting all this money from. It's mind-boggling to
Mm-hmm.
me. But moving to the draft, first two picks, just the first two weaknesses, but great players. Kenyon
Mm-hmm.
Mitchell and like Cooper DeJean. They're
Mm-hmm.
probably 1 and 2 on the board as far as like defensive backs. Then you follow that up with Anais Smith at wide receiver, then Johnny Wilson at wide receiver for Florida State. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter where these guys are drafted, they're going to be quality pieces. And we
Mm-hmm.
talked about this a little bit when we were recapping the draft as far as like which teams won. But just those four moves alone,
Mm-hmm.
I think uh, really helped out like the Eagles address their weaknesses. I think they're a
Mm-hmm.
lot deeper now, and bringing back CJ DJ as well,
Mm-hmm.
GJ, sorry, um, that is going to help round up
Mm-hmm.
any weaknesses they've had from like their secondary and the moves they made in their linebacking core.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenal job in the free agency and the draft.
Uh-huh. And obviously you can't forget Kenny Pickett, you know. Obviously the super sleeper move for the Philadelphia Eagles here. Marcus
I did
Mariota,
again. We talked about
worst
the Eagles, and I forgot to switch the banner.
worst oh you know, Mariota, not a quality backup. Kenny Pickett, he's the perfect guy to emulate, you know, other elite quarterbacks around the league. Eagles, they have their own Patrick Mahomes now with Kenny Pickett. They'll have him in the practice squad, you know, like when they're doing the second team kind of training or whatever. Kenny Pickett's going to be there and be like, "We got our Mahomes. We got him locked up now," and they'll beat Mahomes that way.
Um, that came out of left field. I was not expecting a Kenny Pickett love fest here. Obviously, I know Corstian's joking, but I mean, low key though, like Mac Jones, Kenny Pickett, I would not be surprised
Mm-hmm.
if they have Ryan Tannehill like seasons, given
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate events on
Mm-hmm.
either roster, Jaguars or Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, this is what you do as the Eagles. Like
Mm-hmm.
you either prepare for the future or take castaways and try to develop them in your system and get value out of it. Because Kenny Pickett was a first round pick to the Steelers. And basically, you got that first round pick for cheap. Don't have to worry about a dime. You already have an MVP caliber quarterback. Um, now it's just about saying, how do we win the Super Bowl? Like, how do we do that? We need to build around this talented quarterback. And if we just have a serviceable quarterback that needs to be in the right environment with a good supporting cast that the Eagles do have, wheels up, man. Wheels up. I think their situation is a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Mariota had some like rushing upside, but that was pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
Coaching staff, I think when comparing it to the Cowboys, equally as good because Vic Fangio is one of the best like strategic game planners from the defensive side.
Mm-hmm.
Kellen Moore, they basically stole him from the Cowboys pretty much. I know it took 2 seasons for that to happen, but like he is gonna make sure everybody gets involved in a
Mm-hmm.
creative way. He's gonna bring more creativity to their offense than what they've had last season. Um, I, I I think AJ Brown's gonna have a really good year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kellen Moore does a great job, and same with Saquon. I think both players will have really good years. Like he does a really good job, like putting the number one option in places to succeed, especially with that talent level. Like they're just adding up a bunch of Smiths to the roster. With
Mm-hmm.
a nice Smith is going to be really good um, soon for that team, and I think they got coordinator upgrades in both spots, and that's going to be huge for them in the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think their coordinator moves are very like low floor, high ceiling kind of gambles. Because I mean, we kind of saw last season how the Dolphins defense did somewhat fall apart towards the end, and then we saw the struggles that the Chargers offense had throughout the season with like just with how these coordinators were last season. But we've also seen their overall track record of being more positive than negative. And even with the Chargers' poor season last year, you look at Keenan Allen, who put up one of his best seasons of his career, with the play calling of Kellen Moore. And so, like, again, I just think, I'm really excited. I think that the talent that is on the offense and on the defense is better than the defense or the offense of the Chargers last season and the defense of the Dolphins last season. And so I think they'll be able to, be more creative and actually like let their guys eat a little bit more, But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the coaching changes.
Second year breakout. He kind of broke out a little bit last year, but how could I not go with Jalen Carter?
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Carter is going to explode off the scene, especially with Vic Fangio rushing 4.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's going to give Jalen plenty of opportunities to succeed
Mm-hmm.
there. So I really like that. And then probably for my X factor here, it's going to be Saquon. It's going to be Saquon because there's such a vast difference in the running game right now, just from a talent level. If they capitalize on that, Eagles are unstoppable on offense because they could probably run the read option every play, and you won't know what's coming. You really don't. If they really wanted to, they could run that every single play. And if you key in too much on Saquon, it's either AJ or Devontae over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And if you cover all three, Dallas Goddard's lurking out there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, Saquon is probably the engine that's going to drive this entire offense.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I know Jalen Hurts is a capable player himself, because he's just going to make everybody's jobs easier because everybody on the defense is going to be focused on stopping the run because he's so explosive. He could break off for 60 any play.
Mm-hmm.
So he's my X factor.
Yeah. Loki, those two guys were going to be my guys, but but I'll switch up my
somebody else, Corstian. Come on now.
I'll have my second year breakout is just another defensive guy that I'm excited for, Nolan Smith. Obviously, he broke out at least in the whole pre-draft process last season. Everybody got super hyped, and I think he still played pretty, fairly well. He's obviously in the starter role this season as a pass rusher, so I'm excited for that. But yeah, like, I don't know how you can not have Saquon Barkley as your X factor, going into this season for the Eagles here. Because you think about how DeAndre Swift played last season, you're like, he had his poor moments, but he also excelled at times. I think his first game, he was like 10 carries for 100 yards. Like, Swift, for I'd say at least more than half the time, was cooking with this offense. And then you look at the Giants last season too. Saquon, he played phenomenally, and I'm like we haven't gotten to the Giants yet, but they have over this free agency between first string and second string guys. They signed 5 new offensive linemen. Like, that's how much question marks were surrounding this like team. And then you look at they have a couple good staples on this offensive line, but like, there's still a lot of question marks and a lot of poor play coming from this offensive line, and that you're hoping, steps up and develops. But the fact that Saquon was able to eat with that, I can't even imagine what Saquon can do with this Eagles offensive line. I think
one of the best in the league. He went from one of the worst to the best offensive line.
Yeah. If the Eagles commit to the run game, I could see an 1,800 yard plus season from Saquon. But that's like a whole, like, if they commit to it, which is tricky just because, you got Jalen Hurts, who he's a good passer. He also runs the ball decently a lot now. And I mean, you look at the receivers with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, you got Dallas Goddard there. So like, the receivers are going to get passed to. Hurts is going to throw for a lot, which makes me think that Saquon probably won't reach those almost record-ish numbers. But I think if they do plan on leaning on him a lot more than I'd expect, there's the potential that he could have like an 1,800 plus yard season. Wouldn't be surprised for a 2,000 yard all-purpose season from Saquon this year, though.
Especially with 17 games, like, it's definitely possible for him because he's so efficient with his touches, and especially on that offensive line. Like he's not gonna have to have 20 carries just to reach that
Mhm.
point, and
Mhm.
that's what makes him special. And um, on that note, I mean, I feel like sometimes the Eagles would get too pass happy, whereas
Mhm.
now, like if you incorporate the play action a lot more with Jalen Hurts, you're giving more efficiency to all the receivers now,
Mhm.
and they might go to more of a play action centric offense off the
Mhm.
run, and the key thing of establishing the run. So we'll see what happens, but
Mhm.
I'm very stoked about what the Eagles did. They have a real chance to get back to the Super Bowl with their roster. The
Mhm.
Giants, however, are an absolute mess. The only move I liked out of them this offseason in total was the Malik Neighbors draft pick because that's an
Mhm.
elite wide receiver they can get. But I
Mhm.
looked at their schedule and dang, that's tough. Dang, that's tough, man. I mean, it's not like bad in a vacuum. Like if you gave an elite team like the schedule, they could probably hit double digit win seasons. But with
Mhm.
the Giants, it's not very there's not many games I feel comfortable about with this team.
Mhm.
So I see them around the range of like 6 to 9 wins.
Mhm. Yeah. I could even see like I like outside of Daniel Jones, I do like the general direction that this team has gone, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're picking top 5 next season.
Yeah. And again, their opponents are like on the same level with them. That's why. Like I look at the Steelers, they got better. I look at the Seahawks, they could potentially be a wild card team, even with all the changes on their roster. Vikings could be. We don't know to expect out of the Vikings.
Mhm.
Commanders are better. Browns are going to be better. Um, let's see here. Colts are going to be way better. Like
Mhm.
Falcons are already loads better because they have a better quarterback now. There's
Mhm.
just so many like differences in like 4 of the 5 teams that I mentioned, where it's like in a vacuum with a good quarterback, like this is I would pick the Giants, but like I'm just not confident in them.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah. I think they'll suck. Unfortunately, but like
Great summary right there, man. Wow.
right? Because like you said, like I mean, there's like a few moves that I'm a pretty big fan of, but then like I don't know, I still feel like there's quite a lot of holes on this team that still need to be addressed, and it's like unfavorable contracts that they're dealing with too, which kind of sucks. And
If only they didn't give Daniel Jones that amount of money.
yeah.
Only they gave it to somebody else. Um,
Hmm.
maybe they would have still had him on the team. But losing Saquon, obviously, you
Hmm.
lose Sterling Shepard, who had his moments, but I'm not going to pretend like he was a big difference maker.
Hmm.
Xavier McKinney, huge, huge safety to lose there. Um, and in free agency, their best move they made was Runyon,
Hmm.
which is a guard. And don't get me wrong, offensive line is a huge need for them. I also kind of like the Singletary signing.
Hmm.
I think he's a startable player, but like he's at his best when he was getting like 12 to 15 carries on the Texans. Don't get me wrong, he took that
Hmm.
backfield away from like who's his name? Damian Pierce.
Hmm.
But like I don't know. I don't think you can give Devin Singletary the Saquon treatment and
Yeah.
expect like 80% of the production. I don't know. That's kind of lofty to me. So you're
Hmm.
hoping Eric Gray can help support in that area. But to me, it comes down to the quarterback. Like
Hmm.
your best thing you did to address the quarterback was like get Drew Lock.
Hmm.
Are you serious right now? Like it's just disappointing. And obviously with the trade for Brian Burns, that's going
Hmm.
to be huge for their defense. I think their defense
Yeah.
will be a lot better, but
Hmm.
you still have holes in that defense. So, um, yeah, I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of free agency overall for them.
Yeah. Sorry. Um. Yeah, just like a situation where they had a lot of things to fix, and they kind of had like put band-aids on a lot of things. Like I said, just like earlier when talking about the Eagles, I said that the Giants signed a ridiculous amount of offensive linemen just to kind of like patch things back together to like hopefully be good. But obviously Singletary isn't Saquon. And I think that's like just the big factor of this offense where like even on like last season, and like pretty much every season Saquon's healthy, like he is the offense. Um and so like I'm in a situation where I think that or they're in a situation that I think maybe not week 1, but like eventually Drew Lock could like be the starter some point in the season. If Daniel Jones just like keeps sucking, because it's like the main thing that's keeping you committed to starting Daniel Jones is the contract. Granted, I feel like any second term contract for any quarterback is about 30 million minimum nowadays, like just with how crazy the quarterback market is. So all things considered, it is a fair contract in terms of you signed him to a second contract. But I still think that Drew Lock, what we saw from Seattle at least, in his short little stints of play when Geno Smith was hurt and in that preseason battle like a couple of years ago, there's a chance that Drew Lock wins the starting role some point during the season. And I think that could be kind of fun. I think he provides more passing upside for some of these guys. But outside of that, yeah, it's kind of just like what else is there?
Not excited. It doesn't excite you at all. It really doesn't. And it's like, and it's strange because I was, this was back when didn't know what I was looking for when I was watching. I watched a lot of highlight tapes. Like Drew Lock looked exciting at Mizzou, and then all of a sudden, like you watch him professionally, and it's just like the decision making is horrible. It's horrible, and like I think the good thing he has going for him is like Dable's a good schemed guy. He can scheme up great plays, put guys in best positions. He made do with Tommy DeVito. Okay, that is an accomplishment in itself. But like I think they really should have gone after quarterback this year, and just start from the ground up because you have so many holes on your roster. Why not use that time to develop the quarterback? You could have sat behind Daniel Jones. You would have probably been picking top 10 again, regardless of who's starting a quarterback, just because of like the lack of talent around. But like at least you have a future. Like there's so many good quarterbacks out in this draft. But the two picks I did like were the Neighbors pick and the Newbin pick. I like the talents they picked, but with Neighbors specifically, I probably would have picked a quarterback instead because there were so many wide receivers you could have got out of this draft.
Yeah.
So many. Like, look at the end of the first round and like the second round, and like you see so much of quality talent, and it's like Giants. You don't need a Malik Neighbors. You could have got a Keon Coleman. You could have got like a Lam McConkey. You could have got one of those guys. Like you could have moved around like where you were in the second round to go up and get them. You could have done that. You didn't need a Malik Neighbors. You needed a quarterback, and it's just like whether it's like a stubborn sticking to value, or like stubborn sticking to Daniel Jones to try and justify the money you put into them. I don't know. I really don't know. But like the talents near Newbin and Neighbors, I'm fine with. Newbin was one of the best safeties in the draft class. So like I saw why they picked him with losing McKinney, but the other guys I don't know too much about. So we'll see how they do.
Yeah. I think Drew Phillips is a nice developmental guy. The guy they took in the third round
From Kentucky, right?
Yeah, from Kentucky. Yeah, I think there's like potential that he could have been like a mid day 2 pick, but obviously teams didn't see it necessarily that way, and so he's just a guy that doesn't necessarily need to start right now, but can. So hopefully he plays better. But with the Neighbors pick, I do like it. I think because it's like in a situation where how do you value, because I think Giants, regardless of who they picked at 6, we're going to be picking top 10 likely next season. Like I'm sitting here thinking they're probably going to pick top 5 next season. And so it's like, do you think you like a quarterback in the top 5 next season, or do you like your odds with either Bo Nix, Penix, or McCarthy? And if they're not necessarily sold on one of those 3 guys, then I'm like, I can understand the reasoning of maybe you think that, Quinn Ewers has a great season. Maybe he's your guy, and you're just, waiting a year basically to trade up for him, or, take him at the spot. Or maybe you like Shadur Sanders, and, that's kind of your move. Or there's probably going to be 1 or 2 other quarterbacks that kind of come out of nowhere that end up being top 10 type picks. And so I'm assuming that's maybe the Giants' game plan. If they don't take quarterback next season, I'll be surprised and realize that I thought too highly of them. But yeah, it's either that or Daniel Jones has a resurgent career season, or Drew Lock developed really well in Seattle and is now all of a sudden a starting caliber quarterback. But I think those 2 situations are less likely, and so that's kind of how I view at least the Malik Neighbors pick.
Second year breakout for me, Jalen Hyatt. I think he's getting criminally underrated right now. If he's on your dynasty free agency, I would add him. Take a look. What's the worst that can happen? His ceiling is like opposite of Malik Neighbors. He's going to get a lot of good looks. Obviously, I think highly of Neighbors as a talent. But he's a guy. I get that they put John Michael Schmitz and he's starting right now as center, but I think Jalen Hyatt has so much upside with the speed and his route running ability. Don't forget from last year, he was highly touted. I think he has the potential to break out, and he could easily have an 800, 900 third season. I wouldn't be surprised about that.
Yeah, and I was thinking pretty much the same with at least that second year breakout. I'm just like looking at the other guys. I mean, John Michael Schmidt, he's kind of, I feel like he's already solidified, and the Deontay Banks, obviously I think he played pretty well last season, and so they're kind of guys who I think are settled. Obviously, I think they can get better, but I think Jalen Hyatt was a guy I was really excited for last season. I think he was, one of those guys that I'm like, he may not start year 1, but he'll have like a couple explosive plays year 1 and can kind of have an upward trajectory from there. And so he's in a position where there isn't too much competition ahead of him. Like Darius Slayton, I think he's a serviceable like number 2 guy.
They're all the guys around him are good in spurts. They're good in specific situations, but they're not like all well-rounded. Jalen Hyatt could be a well-rounded option.
Yeah, because I'm like, Wan'Dale Robinson is very much a gadget guy. Like
team dependent. Yep.
Like he can have a surprisingly good season. He can be fantasy relevant potentially, but like it's all because he's getting schemed.
It's a best. He's a best ball player. Like he's best in best ball.
For sure. And so that's why I think Jalen Hyatt is my also second year breakout guy.
Who's your X factor on the team?
My first thought was like, is there one? But if I have to choose, well, I just feel like it's like I said, it's a lost season for them. So it's like from a technical standpoint, I'd say Daniel Jones or Drew Lock's the X factor if they want a successful season, because it's like otherwise they don't have a successful season. But I think I don't know, like Brian Burns is probably the best player on this team. So I could say, him being a good leadership presence for this defense and kind of boosting the players in terms of, their defensive cohesiveness and just kind of like being able to form a scheme around Brian Burns might be the case of an X factor in terms of a success for this team. But that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah. I'm gonna say Daniel Jones. It is what it is. The quarterback is the most important position. They haven't got that right. All the pressure's on Daniel Jones to live up to the contract this season. I'm pessimistic. You think it's a lost season for them. So we doubt it. But if there's anybody who can change this narrative right now, and if the Giants are going to have a winning season, it's because of Daniel Jones. He has got to prove that, like, all the time spending with Brian Dable, all these years experience, sitting behind the bench, like rehabbing from injury, what did he learn from all this? That's what it comes down to. Not going to talk too much about the coaching staff. I don't know what to expect. I know they moved on from Wink Martindale, and added Shane Bowen as defensive coordinator. So that's going to be the one change. I don't know too much about Shane Bowen, but based on the talent they added around this defense, I think the defense will be a little bit better. And hopefully it's not too blitz heavy dependent, so it's not like
Mhm.
you're not showing your cards early. But um, yeah, it's the defense is the wild card. This team is a whole wild
Yeah.
card right now. We're pessimistic about it, but well, a team in a similar spot that I'm actually not that pessimistic about is the Washington Commanders. I like I like what they're building there. Um, they might not have a great season this year,
Mhm.
but I look I'm probably gonna chalk them up to 6 to 9 wins as well. But I'll probably be on the higher range of that. Um,
Mhm.
Granted, they're facing a lot of up and coming teams as well, with like
Mhm.
Arizona. Um, Arizona is going to be a lot better. Pittsburgh's going to be a lot better. Um,
Mhm.
and then obviously Atlanta is going to be a lot better. But
Mhm.
they there's a lot of talent infusion on this team in a very short time, and I wasn't really expecting that when I was looking at the
Mhm.
Commanders offseason.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about this team too. I think they like I mean, there's a chance that they just suck again, but um I think they could be a 7 to 10 win team. Um and it's kind of like last season how remember we were going over like the Commander schedule and like we had them sucking rightfully so like with hindsight. But we were like there's a lot of good pieces that we liked on this team and we think that like it was like a hard team to say that they're going to suck to because there's a lot of like pieces that I think moving forward we were pretty optimistic about. Granted, some of those key pieces left like Montez Sweat, Chase Young, and whatnot, but um, I do think that overall, again, they're continuing to head in the right direction and they're keeping some of the key pieces that they like to continue building on and then adding on veterans that I think are immediate impact players that can actually add value and aren't just like lightly patching some of the holes you might see on the team. um, like like a guy I was really excited for within free agency was Frankie Lou from Carolina. Um, I think he was one of the main focal points of that Carolina defense last season.
As
Um,
was Jeremy Chin, and they got them
mhm.
both.
Yeah, and so I think Frankie Lou is one of my more underrated signings. I feel like most fans don't necessarily know him. Most people don't know linebackers outside of like the Bobby Wagner's, Fred Warner kind of guys, but I think he could have like a top 5 to 10 off ball linebacker kind of season this year in terms of just impact that he has for the team. And so I think just overall, yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about like both free agency moves that they have, and I was a pretty big fan of their draft as well.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a complete quick rebuild from like losing Chase Young and Montez Sweat. They
Mhm.
they followed it up with aggressively addressing this in free agency and the draft. You bring in Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, Cleveland Farrell. You draft Johnny Newton out of Illinois
Mhm.
um, at the very front end of the draft, and you got Javante Jean Baptiste. Um, so they're making it a point to rebuild that front four as soon as possible. Like you mentioned, Lulu paired with Bobby Wagner, Michael Davis, underrated defensive back. Zach Ertz still has a lot of value to bring to
Mhm.
quarterback. Austin Eckler is probably my favorite signing out of that because you're giving Jaden Daniels a lot of options. I think Eckler has a ton of talent. I think he's underrated in drafts right now
Mhm.
because people think he's fallen off. I don't think so. I think you can still get a lot out of it with
Mhm.
the combination of Brian Robinson. Did a great job in free agency, but then you pair it up with their draft picks, and it's like Jaden Daniels, nice job. John Newton, we talked about, great job. Sarancho, awesome job. He's one of the best corners out of that draft as well. Sanat, one of my favorite tight ends to watch. Um, Coleman fills a need. Luke McCaffrey, underrated receiver. Like you just go down the line. It's like, whoa, these are 4 or 5 picks that they've done a really good job on. And
Mhm.
this is to me the screams full like Detroit Lions situation, but higher upside
Mhm.
because if Jaden Daniels plays better than Jared Goff, and
Mhm.
Washington continues to build the talent with like multiple like rookie of the year candidates, like each draft, like this is changing real fast. I'm big fan of what Adam Peters did this offseason.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like in my head, I was like, this feels like the kind of turnaround the Bengals had when Joe Burrow was brought into the mix, and then kind of the turnaround the Texans had last season, and like just with like the moves they made, getting a new quarterback through the draft, I feel like just a lot of pieces together at the right time. I could see I could see them competitive in the playoff race. It's like it'll be hard just because they do have to deal with the Cowboys and the Eagles in that same division. But I mean, like the AFC was such a mess last season. I mean, obviously it's the NFC, but like AFC, like it really was like no one knew who's going to the playoffs until pretty much that last week of football. And I
Yep.
feel like the Commanders are that type of team that could potentially be a team that manages to just get in week 17 of the season or week 18, I guess. Yeah. On their 17th game.
It's quickly approaching that way because Bears have a lot of upside,
Mm-hmm.
Cardinals have a lot of upside, Commanders have a lot of upside. They're one of those teams there, and like you don't know what's going to happen with Atlanta, Tampa Bay,
Mm-hmm.
or New Orleans. Like those are like 8 teams, 7 or 8 teams right there. The Seahawks include that. Like where the Commanders are probably in that bubble. They're probably in that bubble because you look. This is not just talking about the additions. This is also talking about who they already had on the roster. Brian Robinson, dog. Terry McLaurin, dog. Jahan Dotson, dog. Cosme, dog. Allegretti, great addition that they add. Deron Payne, um, Jonathan Allen, bona fide studs. Jamin Davis had a great season last year. Um, Benjamin St. Juice had a great season last year. There are a lot of like great talent here. And the talent that they didn't have, they quickly adjusted in free agency. So I look at this team, um, again, not expecting them to make a run, a deep playoff run at all.
Mm-hmm.
This is a project team, but like great start to the project.
Mm-hmm.
Keep building, get experience this season. 2 years from now, this is an NFC title contender, an NFC East title contender.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. As far as coaching staff, we kind of disrespected Dan Quinn a lot as far as like a defensive coordinator, but um, I think his offensive coordinator signing with Cliff Kingsbury was good. I think Cliff was a little bit over his head as like offensive based head coach. I think he'll succeed a lot in this role, like helping with the
Mm-hmm.
young quarterback with Jaden Daniels. I think that's good. Joe Witt Jr. Followed Dan Quinn from the Cowboys in the passing game as the passing game coordinator for the Cowboys. I don't know too much about him, but based on like how explosive the Cowboys were, you hope to get the best out of Forbes and Benjamin St. Juice out of that, and then hopefully um, not Tyler Newbin, um, um, Jeremy Chin. Like you're gonna expect him and the combination of Joe with Jr. to really help build up that secondary. So we'll see what happens with this team. It's gonna be a roller coaster vibe. If you're a fan, don't expect a deep playoff run at all. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a light chance they can make the wild card. That's kind of where I see their ceiling as.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you're a fan of the team, like this should be a fun season to watch for the Commanders. I think, especially like even if they suck most of it, just the fact that you have a rookie quarterback and it's just fun to watch your rookie quarterback kind of, work things out. I think
Coming
this
off a
is just
Heisman too. Coming off a Heisman trophy.
hmm yeah, right. Like this is going to be a fun team to watch, win or lose. And I think that they're on an upward trajectory. Like I said, 7 to 10 wins means that they'll be decently competitive this season. And I think there's a lot to look forward to. Luke McCaffrey's a guy that I was really high on early on in the whole like draft process, where he isn't like the most elite route runner, but he has really strong hands. He like the draft report is literally no matter where you throw, like he just catches everything, like one-handed, two-handed, no-handed. I don't know, but like, um, yeah. And so I think he adds on to just the receiving room in terms of like what each guy can do. But yeah, Jaden Daniels, I think it'll be fun. Obviously, he has his limitations as all rookies do, but like overall, good. And obviously, he has the GOAT Marcus Mariota to learn from.
Way to bring it full circle here. Way to bring it full circle. We popped out Kenny Pickett. We hated on Marcus Mariota. Now we're loving Marcus Mariota, calling him the GOAT. Awesome job. I'm guessing your second year breakout player is Emmanuel Forbes.
Yeah, it'll be Emmanuel Forbes.
Yep, same here. Same here. I think we've talked about Joey Wood Jr., Dan Quinn. He gets a lot out of his cornerbacks for whatever reason. So I think Forbes will have a really good season this upcoming year. My X factor is Terry McLaurin. The reason I say this is because when you watch Cliff's offenses, he's structuring it a lot to get guys like DeAndre Hopkins isolated on different plays. I think Terry McLaurin's going to be that isolated guy. And I think he's going to get a lot of like primary targets from Jaden Daniels. He's going to get fed a lot, and he's due for a breakout season. He is probably the straw that stirs the drink for this team. As far as like how well Jaden Daniels progresses. So it's not necessarily a team performance thing. It's more so of like how quickly can Jaden McDaniels come up to speed, and that's really going to be how much can he trust his veteran wide receiver. So I'd say Terry McLaurin's my X factor.
Yeah. For my X factor, there's like a couple guys I was thinking of. Obviously, I'll just pick one, but I'll just have I'll just do Frankie Louvu. It was kind of like between Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner. And I think what decided for me at least was just in my opinion, the longevity of both those players' careers. Obviously Bobby Wagner, he had like 180 combined tackles last season, which is insane, but he's also like 33-ish, 34-ish maybe. And so like for a run this season, he could be valuable-ish, but obviously I don't know when the fall-off's going to be, but I know Frankie Louvu is younger. He's shown that he can play ball last season, and I think he can, pretty much no matter what, outside of an awful scheme fit, will be a successful guy and can be a solid commander for this Commanders team. But
nice, great delivery there.
Yeah.
I can't with you, Corstian. This podcast has gone off the rails. We hope you enjoyed it. You can follow us on our channel at Amon a Mission on YouTube. All spaces there. Free for a loop, didn't I? You thought I was going to give you the Instagram username. Well, here it is, Amon.a.mission. Go ahead and follow us there. Yeah, I have no words to describe why we haven't updated that in a while. It'll get updated at some point. Yeah, once I can move different apartments and work that out, I'll get my act together, guys. But next up, it's going to be the AFC South. I'm excited to talk about this division a lot. I think it's going to be hard to pick out who's going to be the worst team in that division, to be honest. There's a lot of up and coming teams from that division specifically, so that will be a fun one. I can't wait to talk about that before the 4th of July weekend. But you guys have a good one. Corstian, any parting words for these guys, especially the Marcus Mariota stands?
Yeah. MVP race between Kenny Pickett and Marcus Mariota right here. Calling it right now. Both 5K yard passers. Jaden Daniel and Jalen Hurts get hurt. All of a sudden, thrusting the role. Easy wins. Pick him up in fantasy.
Place the $5 bet on MVP for not Jaden Daniels, Marcus Mariota. Or you can do Kenny Pickett. And if you win $100,000, you can thank Corstian right now by donating 20% of that to him. Because he's the one that told you to do that. But all kidding aside, you guys have a good one. See you later.
Yeah. Peace out.